everyone, and welcome to MindMatters Masterclass. So today we are addressing the subject matter of addictions. This is in conjunction, we're coinciding this MindMatters Masterclass with the United Nations International Day Against Drug Abuse, today, 26th of June. Our first speaker is Dr. Gabriel Ong. He's the Senior Principal Psychologist of CNB, Central Narcotics Bureau, serving in our nation, in our Ministry of Home Affairs. He was also the former Deputy Director of the Psych and Correctional Rehabilitation Branch in Singapore Prison Service. So he's been really at that level of policies as well as understanding it from a national level, how it is happening in Singapore and what can we do. So without much further ado, can we all please give a digital applause to welcome Dr. Gabriel Ong.
Thanks, Glenn, once again for the introduction, the warm introduction. Just very quickly, by way of self-introduction, yes, I have been with the prison service for too long. I joined prison service around 2001. Yeah, and I was with the prison service up until 2023 or so. Okay, so that's a fair bit of time. There were times where I stepped out of the prison service, but I came back again. But I was with the prison service, and during the period of time when I was there, I was working with offenders. I was working with people with a variety of reasons why they are in prison, for violent offences, for sex offences, and certainly for drug offences as well. I work with youth, women offenders as well, for a wide variety of issues. And in the past 2 years, I've been with the Central Narcotics Bureau, overseeing a team that looks at drug risk assessments and providing services to CNB officers as well. Yeah, what I'm going to cover today, really, as what Glenn said, it's touch and go. Yeah, because usually when if I were to speak on this, I usually will take 2 to 3 hours. So I'm just trying to compress that information into this period of this window of time. I seek your understanding. If some of the information I am not able to go in greater depth that I would like to. Yeah, you will see that the title of my presentation here, it says psychology of substance use disorder and not addiction. Yeah, and then you might be wondering, hey, how come? The topic is on addiction, but why am I talking about substance use disorder? Over time, you will see that if you look at the literature and the science behind it, we have the literature has begun to move away from the term addiction because it's too imprecise. Because nowadays, when people talk about addiction, there is the understanding of the word addiction becomes very loose. For example, people might say, wow, I binge watched the Korean drama. Wow, I'm addicted to Korean drama. I watched the entire series. I'm addicted to Korean show. I'm addicted to bubble tea. I must have my pipakao bubble tea, every week. I'm addicted to it. So that the understanding that, not very precise, which is why over time, the current use is to say substance use disorder. Okay, so this is the frame that I'm going to talk about. I phrase it as FAQs because I think that it's easier to organize the information in our heads when we think about it in terms of questions that we like to know about substance use disorder. What is it? Why it happens? What happens to somebody with substance use disorder? And then what can we do about it? So this is how I structured today's sharing. Before we begin, when we talk about what is SUD, I need to go back to how it's defined in according to the DSM. DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. This is the reference text that psychologists use when we talk about mental health disorders. Currently, it is in the 5th version, but I need to refer back to the 4th version because some of the ways that they describe substance use disorder in the 4th version is helpful for us to understand some key ideas here. Right, and it's important I thought it's important for us to go through some of these things because if you Google on your own, if you go through, those web articles or some of the earlier articles about substance use disorder or addiction, you'll find that they use some of these terms that I'm going to talk about. Yeah, and then it might be a bit confusing, right? So this is why I will very briefly cover what is being said about substance use disorder. The earlier edition of DSM talks about substance abuse and chemical dependence or substance dependence. The key difference is this, right? Both involve some sort of use of substance. But if you look at the substance abuse, the key idea here, and I've highlighted it in red, the key idea here is that for substance abuse, we're talking about intentional overuse of drug. Whereas for substance dependence, if you look at the red colored words again, we are talking about compulsive impaired control of drug use. Let me give you an example. I think examples help us to concretize some of the things that I'm talking about. When we talk about substance abuse, we are talking about intentional and conscious overuse. An example will be if I am not feeling well, I have a cough, I take cough mixture, right? And typically we'll take about 10 mils of the cough mixture when we are not feeling well, correct? But overuse and abuse of a cough mixture might be I take 2 bottles. Okay, I take 2 bottles not to deal with a cough issue, but I take 2 bottles because it helps me to relax, it helps me to sleep better. In other words, we are abusing what the substance is intended for. In other words, we are abusing what is the normally understood or accepted use of a particular substance, right? If I have pain and I use some sort of morphine, right, to control my pain, that is appropriate use. But if I intentionally use heroin for other purposes other than pain control or pain relief, and I use it for intoxication or for the sense or relief from stress or not the intended purpose, right, then that's abusing the use of the drug. Substance abuse is intentional and is conscious. Whereas dependence, the idea of dependence here is the idea that there is already an impaired control. I have no more control over the use of the drug. And that is a key difference. Substance abuse versus dependence, right? Okay, the arrow, the red triangle is to show that over time, the literature tells us that over time, if I'm abusing a substance, if I'm intentionally using a substance over time, you'll find that increasingly the abuser, the person who is abusing the drug, will find greater and greater difficulty controlling the drug. And then he or she may reach a point where he experiences dependence instead of just mere abuse. Okay? All right. So this is the clarification. You will come across this in many other sources out there, right? So this distinction is important. Now we talk about DSM V, which is the current edition. The DSM V doesn't make the distinction between substance abuse and chemical dependence anymore. It calls the whole thing substance use disorder. So I hope to be a bit more precise when I talk about use the term substance use disorder this evening. And when we look at the understanding of substance use disorder, there's also a distinction between a mild, moderate, and severe. And we'll just go to the next slide. You'll see that when we talk about severe substance use disorder, it is the idea of addiction. So addiction is when we talk about addiction from a technical point of view, right? Not your layman, not your addicted to Korean drama or addicted to bubble tea kind of understanding. But when we talk about addiction, it is a severe substance use disorder where the person experiences impaired control, no more control over the use of the substance. That must be our understanding of addiction or severe SUD. Okay, next slide, please. So what is SUD? You see on the screen a lot of words. Basically, what I'm showing you is that there are 11 criteria when we are trying to identify what is a substance use disorder. 11, that's a lot to take in. Let me kind of chunk it for you. Essentially, you're looking at 4 categories, right? If you click the next slide, please. The first category, we are looking at impaired control. I have no longer the sense of control over the amount of drugs that I can take, or I have no more control over how long I'm going to take it. Even if I try to quit it, I cannot quit it, and I will have that sense of craving or wanting or yearning for the drug. So the first category is impaired control. If you click again, the second category is social impairment, meaning that I reach a point where I neglect my roles. I am, instead of being a student or being a worker, I use that time to go and take drugs instead. Instead of going to work to do work, I hide in the toilet or go somewhere else to take drugs. Or I might be neglecting other roles such as being a parent or being a child to parents, right? And then neglecting caregiving duties for my children, or I might be neglecting financial responsibilities. That is what social impairment tells us. It could be also about social interpersonal problems. For instance, I don't really want to go out, activities I give up. I don't really want to go out. I'd rather use the free time I have to take more drugs. Yeah, that's what we mean by social impairment. The third category is risk use. I use more and more amount of drugs, even though it's hazardous to health. Or I might engage in dangerous activities in order to get hold of the drugs. Or I might be facing physical problems or psychological problems related to the drug use, but I still continue to use that drug. Yeah, that is what we mean by risky use. And the fourth the fourth category is pharmacological criteria, basically tolerance, which is the idea that if a person takes drugs over time, he or she will find that he will need more and more amount of the drug in order to get the same effect, the same pleasurable effect. And withdrawal is the idea that if a person doesn't take drugs, then he or she may find that he may undergo a physical or psychological suffering as a result of not taking the drug. So 11 criteria, but essentially we need to think about it in terms of four categories. One, I have no longer control of the drug. Two, I'm giving up social responsibilities in order to consume drug. Three, I'm taking a drug even though it's dangerous or harmful to me. And four, I am experiencing these symptoms as well, okay, of tolerance and withdrawal. So what does mild, moderate, and severe mean? Mild, generally, we look at if the person is identifying 2 or 3 of the 11 criteria there, then we'll say, okay, this person has mild SUD. Moderate is 4 or 5. And if a person reports to have 6 or more of these criteria, then we will say that the person has severe SUD, or in other words, addicted, right? So that is the criteria. That must be the thinking when we talk about addiction. Why is this distinction important? Why am I spending so much time talking about this? Because the idea is this: when we are able to identify whether the person is mild, moderate, or severe in terms of the substance use disorder, right, then our treatment, our approach to treating the addiction or the substance abuse will change accordingly. Yeah, it will change according to how bad or how severe the condition is. I won't speak too much about the treatment part because I will leave it to Tony to cover more of that. But that's the idea here. The diagnosis is important so that we can scale the amount of treatment accordingly. Okay, next slide, please. So the first question is, why is SUD? The second question is, why does it happen? Why does a person, when he's taking drugs, reach a point where he or she loses control of the drug consumption? Yeah, the broad idea, if you look at the literature, there are so many factors. There are okay, that's exaggeration to say 100. There are many, many factors. But certainly what we can do is to categorize them in three domains, so to speak. The biological factors, the psychological factors, and the social factors. You see a bunch of examples of some of these factors according to these categories. I won't be able to cover everything. I will go through it quite quickly, but enough to give you a handle of what biological, psychological, and social factors may mean. Okay, next slide, please. I'm going to spend a fair bit of time when talking about biological, because this is the key area where the process of addiction takes place. Some might say that addiction or substance use disorder is a disease that happens because of changes in the brain, right? So that is one way of thinking about it. And I have to go into some sort of biological terms, but stay with me, and I assure you there will be some payoff if you are able to stay with me, okay? Key things to know from this slide is the idea of neurons or nerve cells. What are these things? Essentially, our whole body, we have billions of nerve cells in our body. Some estimates tell us that we have about 86 billion nerve cells in our body, right? And the nerve cells are important because they are the cells that relay messages through our body. What does it mean? It means, I'll give you an example, right? Supposing if I accidentally stub my toe on the chair or table, right? There will be a pain signal, and the pain signal is received by my brain, right? From the toe to the brain, how does the message from the stubbing of the toe reach my brain and say that was painful? That message is transmitted by the nerve cells. Okay, the nerve cells relay messages through the body. It's not just from the body to the brain. The brain can also transmit messages to other parts of the body. For example, if I'm walking on the street and somehow I see a very fierce-looking dog, and then I register that I'm afraid of dog and I want to run, the brain will send a message to tell my legs to start moving, right? That is where nerve cells are also used from the brain to my legs, right, to relay the message, run or get out of that place. In case you're wondering, if you look at the diagram there, the nerve cells are the ones that look like spiders, so to speak. Okay. Now, if you look at the expanded picture, you see that there's a close-up of how the nerve cells, right, 2 different nerve cells. There's a gap in between, yeah? And how then does information get transmitted from the gap, through the gap, past the gap, yeah? That's the idea of the neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitters are chemicals in our body that facilitate the passing of the message from one cell to another. Okay, that's the key idea here. More importantly, before we get caught up in all these terms, more importantly is the idea of dopamine. Dopamine is the key chemical, all right, that is used in the passing of messages between nerve cells. And dopamine is the neurotransmitter or the chemical that passes messages in terms of things like pleasure, reward, motivation. There are easily 100 over such neurotransmitters or chemicals, different types. I'm sure you have heard of some of these things: endorphins, serotonin, GABA, so on and so forth. And they all have different purposes, right? Endorphins help us to, when we exercise and we get the endorphins, the runners high, and so on and so forth. Serotonin helps us to feel disgust, if I remember correctly. You have oxytocin, right? Oxytocin is a neurotransmitter that helps us to feel love and warmth towards other people. Dopamine is that particular chemical that is transmitted across cells, across nerve cells, when we feel pleasure or reward or motivate, that leads us to motivation. Okay, hang on with me. I know I'm going through some technical terms, but hang on with me. You go to the next slide, I will elaborate a little bit more. What do I mean? For example, if I have a very good meal, I have a very good meal. When I have that enjoyable meal, right? You go to the next slide. When I have a very enjoyable meal, dopamine enters my system, right? And that's where I experience a pleasure, oh, that was a really, really satisfying meal, right? And I feel a sense of reward for consuming that particular food. And I'm motivated to seek out this food in future again. It's the same with relationships. If I have a meaningful, deep relationship, or I have a conversation with somebody that is deep and meaningful, dopamine enters the system, and I feel a sense of satisfaction and pleasure also, right? And then I feel rewarded. I feel that, okay, I want to seek this relationship even further. It's the same with sex, right? When people encounter or have a sexual encounter, the system, your brain has a flood of dopamine, and that's where you feel pleasure, you feel rewarded, and you feel that I'm motivated to continue this behavior as well. So many things that are pleasurable are pleasurable because of this chemical in our brains called dopamine. Okay, and there are natural levels of dopamine. Dopamine naturally occurs in our system already. If you go to the next slide, what happens when a person takes drugs? The thing about drugs is that it releases, or it doesn't release, but it causes a flooding and overabundance of dopamine in the system, more than what a natural reward would give, right? And when there is an overabundance of that dopamine in the system, the sense of pleasure or the sense of reward and the motivation to seek that particular substance is very high as well, which is probably some of the experiences people who have taken substances may experience that intense sense of pleasure when they consume drugs. That's because there's an overabundance of this particular chemical in their body, in the brain at this juncture as they are consuming drugs. The thing about this overabundance, we can stay on this. The thing about this overabundance of dopamine is this, right? Over time, when there's this overabundance of dopamine in the system, in your brain system, eventually or gradually, you'll see that the brain will change. There is a change in the brain, right? Because the brain is not used to this heightened levels of dopamine in the system. If you go back to the point that I mentioned earlier, there are already natural levels of dopamine in the brain where we engage in activities like sex, food, relationships, and other tasks that give us pleasure and reward. Dopamine, because it appears in, or rather drugs, because it releases that amount of dopamine in an overabundance, the brain is not able to manage. And in fact, what happens is that the transmission of the chemical becomes dysregulated, right? You look at the red terms there, neurotransmission dysregulation takes place when the changes in the brain starts to manifest because of overabundance of the dopamine in the system over a long period of time. Okay, you go to the next slide, please. I'll go through this as quickly as I can because just to give us a sense, all right, of how this happens. When we have okay, so the neurons or the nerve cells communicate with each other, right? They form certain pathways. What happens with drugs in the system is that it creates other new pathways in our brains. And when these pathways remain in our brain, then it will reach a situation where the person, even after they stop using the substances, the person may be triggered. Let me use another example to explain what I'm trying to say. Okay, you look at a picture there, right? It's a shortcut, right? There's a beautiful name for this. It's called a desire path, right? It's a shortcut. Before the desire path, emerges, there is this long path, long cut or whatever you want to call it, the proper path, right? This is a pathway. This is the regular pathway. Over time, if a person is using a shortcut to get to his destination, over time the grass will die off and a dirt path will form. That is a new path, and sometimes people get motivated to use the shortcut, right? Because it gets us to our destination faster. And over time, if people keep using the shortcut, it creates a new path, right? And that is what's happening when we, as an analogy, right? When there is a drugs in the system, then you find that new pathways are created. So much so that even if the person is not taking drugs any longer, the pathway is still existent. The desire path is still there. The reason why I'm spending a little bit more time about talking about neural pathways is this. Supposing you are a town planner, supposing you are an urban planner, and you are trying to get rid of the desire path or the shortcut because it's ugly, right? What would you do? What would you do to stop people from taking that shortcut to get to their destination? There are some things that you can do. One is you erect barriers so that people don't step onto the shortcut, right? You create a deterrent, which is you create deterrent so that people don't step into that path, right? Allow the grass to grow back so that it becomes less of a path for people to want to walk there. I think another consequence is that you want to create the longer route. You want to make the longer route more attractive so that people will want to walk along the longer route. What am I trying to say here? If you think about it, what it means in terms of helping people to manage substance abuse when new pathways, in other words, the drug pathways are formed, is deterrence so that people don't step onto the pathways, recovery through abstinence, and then creating other sources of satisfaction elsewhere. These are some of the treatment things that we will talk about later. Okay, this slide is basically to show that when a person is addicted to substances, different substances work on the brain in different ways, but they work in the same way in the sense that they will create an overabundance of the dopamine in your system. You'll see that in the addicted brains, the parts where it shows that the brain is lighted up is smaller. The receptors there are lower. This goes to show the point that I was making earlier, that when our systems are flooded with an overabundance of dopamine, the brain will react. The brain will try to achieve some sort of homeostasis, or what we call some sort of stability, right? And therefore, over time, it will become less, I'm putting it really simply here, it becomes less sensitive to the dopamine, which is why people who are addicted to substances, because they have fewer, their brains are less reactive to the dopamine over time, they need more of the substance in order to feel the same level of satisfaction, right? So this was an important slide that when I was working with substance abusers back in prison. These are information that helps the abusers that I was working with understand that, hey, it affects your brain. When you are taking drugs and we are addicted, your brain changes. And then when they see this, they get kind of concerned, right? Oh, I didn't know that my brain gets affected this way. Yeah. All right. Next slide, please. That's at the biological level. At the psychological level, what we see is that the decision for people to use drugs happens also because of negative thought patterns and negative behavior patterns. Let me give you an example. Okay, what do I mean by negative thought patterns? I once worked with this lady, right? And she was sharing with me that, why she became addicted, started taking drugs after stopping for a long period of time. And then she relapsed and took drugs again. So I asked her what happened. And she was saying that, I'm not a wasteful person. Then I said, what do you mean by you're not a wasteful person? Then she shared with me that, there was one time when the reason why she relapsed was because her uncle had called her over the phone and said, I have some drugs in the cupboard. I want to throw it away. Can you please retrieve the drugs from my cupboard and throw it away? I don't want the drugs anymore. So she did what her uncle told her. She went to the cupboard, she retrieved the pack of drugs, and then she thought to herself, hey, but very wastely, if I throw away the drugs, very waste. I'm not a wasteful person, right? I'm generally not a wasteful person. So she decided to take the drugs. Yeah. That is what I mean by a negative thought pattern. Patterns of thinking that facilitate, or in other words, what we sometimes explain to the people that I work with, excuses or reasons that we give ourselves so that we can, the excuses we give ourselves so that we can continue taking drugs. Yeah, so the person in this case, the lady, thought that, I'm not a wasteful person, and that was the excuse she gave herself. She giving herself permission to take drugs, right? And that's how she started her relapse. Negative behavioral patterns would be things like, some people tell me that they take drugs because very stressful, and therefore they take drugs to cope with stress, or they feel very shy, or they feel that they're not as confident in front of other people. But when they take certain types of drugs, they feel more confident. So this is what we mean by negative behavioral patterns, where it can be addressed by equipping them with certain skills in order to cope with situations other than resorting to drugs. Okay, so that's at the psychological thinking and feeling level. Next slide, please. We can also talk about factors at the social level. This one is quite straightforward. Peer pressure, friends, negative peers who introduce drugs, who make drugs available, and that facilitates a person's decision to take drugs. Cultural norms is also another thing, especially emerging social media. You have what people see online, how drugs are presented as a fashionable or not dangerous kind of thing to consume, celebrities consuming drugs. So these create certain expectations or certain cultural norms that people refer to when they decide to take drugs. Okay, next slide. So what I've covered, why people take drugs. People take drugs because of changes that have taken place in their brain. That's one. People take drugs because of how they think and how they feel about certain things that leads them to increase their decision to take drugs. And people take drugs because of experiences and pressures by friends or exposure to media or cultural norms. And taken together, when you have more of these factors, the chances of a person abusing drugs is higher. And the chances of a person developing a substance use disorder is also higher. Okay, what happens when to somebody with substance use disorder? There is a whole list of things that happen to a person, but I'm just going to cover 2 or 3 here. Okay, we find in the literature that one of the key things is that over time, when a person has substance use disorder, they experience impulsivity, they make bad decisions, they have poor inhibitory control. And what happens in that instance is that they may find that they become impulsive, they tend to act in ways that will get them in trouble or will make it harmful for them, right? They may engage in criminal activity as well. They may, not always, but they may engage in criminal activity. The inhibition to commit certain crimes like theft becomes taken off, right? And then they may exhibit some of these behaviors. A second consequence is poor life choices. You find that because of the impaired control as a result of severe substance use disorder, they may prefer to do things, right, where they get immediate rewards from the drugs, right? So even if they, at the cost of future physical or social consequences. What do I mean by this? So they would rather focus on taking drugs or finding when is the next opportunity to take drugs, even if it means that they might lose their job, or even it might mean that they might get into financial trouble or legal trouble. Yeah, so poor life choices are made. And the third, broadly, we also talk about poorer quality of life. It's not just the individual where you have a problem with drugs, but your global quality of life in many other aspects, in work, in your studies, in your relationships, in your health gets affected as well. Okay, just going to the next slide. These are some of the things that we often hear working at CNB, and these are some of the stories that I once in a while hear from my colleagues. Right, the first picture on the left, is a picture of how an abuser neglects her parental duties because of substance use disorder. Okay, can you look at it can hardly be said that this is an optimal living situation, living condition. If you look at the middle two pictures, San Francisco, if you look at overseas in some countries, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Oregon, Kensington, you see repeated images popping up. These are not just internet images. You know, I had colleagues, CMB colleagues, officers who went to San Francisco, and they saw for themselves, and they were sharing that, you know, even when they may be officers, you know, but when they were walking down the streets, in examples that you see there on the screen, they felt unsafe, they felt fearful, right? And they felt that this cannot be the way, this cannot be optimal living. This cannot be optimal living. What you are seeing are scenes of homelessness, drugs being traded openly, right? People taking drugs openly on the streets, and they are just recovering from the effects of taking drugs on the streets. Yeah. I put these pictures here and related to the earlier points about quality of life and poor impulsivity and poor health outcomes as well, because oftentimes people do go away thinking that, you know, and I've heard some of the abusers that I've worked with in the past, and they'll say, you know, drug affect me, ma. It only affects me. You know, why is it so serious in Singapore? Other countries also take drugs, ma. Why, you know? But over time, we realize, if you look at these pictures, drugs is really not a victimless crime, right? Because people get affected, family members get affected, children get affected. The next generation, intergenerational crime happens. The wider society, safety of the streets, all these gets affected as well. Back in prisons, we asked family members, you know, of some of the abusers that we are working with, ask the family members, you know, if you could write a story, if you could write a letter to your loved one who is in prison because of drugs, what would you say to them? It is amazing the stories that came out, because the stories that came out were stories of hurt, stories of regret, stories of fear, you know, of what will happen to my loved one who is taking drugs. These are stories of parents, of siblings, of children who were expressing so much hurt because of a drug abusing family member. Yeah, but the lovely touch among all the stories, that even though there's a lot of hurt expressed, but there's also a lot of hope expressed, right? Where children, parents of these drug abusers were expressing hope that their children, their loved ones will recover as well. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so these are some of the things that happen. Then what do we do? Yeah, just 2 quick points before I hand over the time to Tony, right? Assessment. I think the key point here is the assessment should be done by qualified professionals. Even though I provided a checklist, it's not, I asked a couple of questions and then I add it up. Okay, you have a substance use disorder. Okay, it's important for qualified professionals to do this assessment. Yeah, and treatment. I think if you have understood what I was mentioning about biological, psychological, and social risk factors, then the treatment that is holistic needs to address all these 3 factors as well. Okay, next slide. The last slide already is really a summary. Addiction, as we must understand it, is that severe form of substance use disorder. And the key feature here is impaired control over drug use. I have no more control over the drug use. The second key point is that there are 3 domains to think about when we talk about substance use disorder. And the third point is that because there are all these domains, 3 domains, right? Then it tells us that in order to treat, there must be a comprehensive approach towards successful outcomes, right? So that is my last slide. I'll hand this over to Tony.
Dr. Tony Tan is a counseling psychologist. He's been my partner over the last few years. During the pandemic, we do quite a lot of things together. He is a master in addiction science and also the owner and clinical director of a couple of rehabilitation centers in Chiang Mai, Thailand, one of which he just recently opened, Sanctuary Healthcare. He, including me, we have the same kind of background. We ourselves were involved in drugs and we are ex-offenders ourselves. And that's what makes him a very credible source of information as well from a personal level. So please help to welcome Dr. Tony Tan.
Thank you, Glenn. Good evening, everyone. So thank you, Dr. Gabriel. Very extensive, very in-depth explanation. So today, I'm covering this webinar from Thailand, Chiang Mai at the moment. So I'll go straight into the area that I'm focusing on. So the first part I'm going to talk about is the current trend and the observation as to people who are using drugs. Addiction, as we know, is a complex chronic health condition. Is continuously influenced by, as we see, society, economic, and cultural factor. The face of addiction changes, okay, and it requires constant adaptation in prevention, treatments, and policy. A good example is if you're looking at addiction in the early 90s, 2000, it will be more, towards heroin use, opiate addiction. And then into years 2000, we shifted towards, more party drugs, synthetics, ice, ecstasy. And today it has continued to evolve. We have cocaine. We have the latest is what is quite popular now, K-pop. We also have other synthetic drugs coming up. So it's constantly changing, and that need adaptation in treatment approach. So what I'm going to cover today is what we are observing in this addiction pattern and among the individual that is seeking help. Okay. All right, next slide. Okay, so the trend one is what we're looking is the increased complexity and polysubstance. Okay, when we talk about polydrug use or polysubstance use, means individuals are using multiple substances at the same time. It's quite different from the early phase in the 80s, 90s addiction scene. Today, we can see people are like having, example, alcohol with drug use like cocaine, or even benzodiazepine abuse, or we can see opiate with stimulant abuse. So this actually complicate treatment. It's not just standalone, one size fix all approach. So it does also make the treatment work more challenging. And also we know with this mixture of using drugs, it increases the overdosing risk, okay? And then the next thing is the synthetic drugs, as we know, especially in the US at the moment, fentanyl, Canada as well. Fentanyl is quite widely abused. It has been a big problem over there. The trend is coming into Asia as well. So with this synthetic drug use, it challenged the treatment approach, as we are looking at much more danger of highly potent drugs use. Yeah. So what we can see here is it actually causes an unpredictable effect with extreme overdose potential. Okay. Last thing is the trend we're also looking at is the harm reduction. Harm reduction is actually we don't look at total abstinence. We are looking at using another form of medications, or even some sort of drugs to actually mitigate, reduce, and helping them to shift using less potent approach. So what it means here is really we are not asking them to stop entirely. However, but we are looking at reducing. Quite common is nitrazone. For people who are on alcohol abuse or even opiate, we would introduce another medication for them to stay on until they are ready to, terminate their addiction or dependency on that substance. So these are the three trends, that really challenge the complexity of drugs in today. Okay, the next trend is, okay, the shifting domain and emerging threat. Okay, like opiate crisis, fentanyl, as I have mentioned before. In my treatment center that we work with, I operate in Thailand, but mostly our clients are international clients. They flew over to Thailand for treatment at our center. What I getting a lot from US, Canada is actually fentanyl abuser. It's one of our top addictions that we are treating at the moment from US and Canada area. Yeah. The next thing is we also notice the stimulants are actually resurging into the scene at the moment, like ice, methamphetamine, and cocaine use are on the rise. Yeah, especially cocaine use. It has been reported many people seeking treatment for that as well. So we can see that trend is actually increasing, as well as opiate use. We call it speedballing. So they will combine stimulants with opiate to create a synergy effect. The challenge for this is really we need to use MAT is medical assisted therapy. Means we will use medication to help them to taper down their stimulants use or dependency. But because of the stimulants are mostly synthetic drugs, which makes the detox process quite complicated. So that is actually one emerging threat that we are facing as well in treatment. I am in Thailand, as most of you are aware. Cannabis is legal over here, but I can see in worldwide context, a lot of countries are legalizing cannabis use. What happened here is with this increased legalization, it actually promote more legal use. And what it causes is also we are seeing more people become addicted to that. Last thing is alcohol. Alcohol has always been a high on the addiction treatment list. Partly is because it's legal, it's widely available, and it's very much affordable. So it's actually what we say is one of the most prevalent problems that we are looking at in terms of treatment. And the problem with this is people tend to mix alcohol together with other type of drugs or medication that make treatment more complex. Okay, and the next third trend, okay, is the expanding scope of behavioral addiction. Okay, so we talk about SUD, substance use addiction, means you take something, you're addicted to something because you need to ingest it. Behavioral addiction is more about behavior. We're talking about gaming, internet, sex, gambling, so these are related to behavior. So we can see that these are also increasing, okay, like gaming and internet. I think among the youth today, it has become a problem impacting society as well as mental health. So what happened here is actually excessive use and addiction, it become very not easy to define. It blur the line, okay? So what we are also finding hard in terms of treatment is we are living in a context of today that we can't live without technology. But how do we prevent them from being overly abusing phone use, gaming, and how to maintain that healthy use? It's become a very big challenge, even in treatment, what we are doing here. Gambling, okay, it has been a problem, especially with online platform, okay? I'm not talking about physical casino where people go there. That can be controlled, but with technology, online platform become more accessible, it's actually become a big problem. Our youngest clients that we have treated is actually, I can tell you, it's about 16, 17 years old. So we can see that trend is also becoming a lot of issue. Kids got into illegal money lending, stealing from parents, selling their things just to feed their gambling addiction, like what we're looking at online casino as well as sport betting. Sex, pornography addiction, even shopping addiction, online buying, that is actually, we are seeing a increasing concern as well. People are seeking treatment with that. Especially during the COVID time, we have seen a big increase in actually sex and pornography addiction. Yeah. What are causing all this is the driver, the cause of it, easy access through technology, social media, and also this become a way that we deal with stress and anxiety, and that really doesn't help, you see. So that is actually the trend tree, what we observe about what drives addiction. Okay, let's go down to some case study. Okay, I give you some case study in a client profile. We call it the persuasive co-occurrence of mental health issue, meaning they have mental health issue as well as addiction issue. Why? We can see a lot of what we call as crossover, high comorbidity. That means two symptoms of addictions and mental health are combined together. Okay, especially we see a lot of patients that are treating addiction. They are also struggling with depression, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar, or even psychosis due to prolonged drug abuse. Yeah. So substance use can be the cause of it, or it can also be a way they deal with their mental distress. We call it self-medication. Actually, what we are running the program here is actually a comorbidity treatment program. We don't just treat addiction as standalone. Especially in today's context, we can say it's always a mixture of both. Trauma-informed care, That is also one of our strengths because we can see a lot of this addiction. The root cause has been childhood trauma, unresolved trauma. Childhood trauma is what we call as adverse childhood experience. We can actually diagnose you for that. So what happened here is because this trauma that has been unresolved and it causes distress in the person growing up. So in that process, when they have the means and they get able to assess things like alcohol or even drugs, and that actually help them to relieve the distress symptom. What happened here is addiction start to take shape and start forming up because it become a way they help them to deal with their distress from unresolved trauma. What we are looking here is really we need to have an integrated treatment approach, not just stand alone for these cases. Yeah, like what we are treating, mental health, trauma, as well at the same time, detoxing them, work on their addiction. So it's not just a single approach anymore. Okay, let's look at the case client profile 2. Okay, so this profile is about a social issue as well as vulnerability. Okay, so we are looking at the profile of a client, which we have is about poverty as well as homelessness. Okay, and addiction has been always involved in this client. But what we are also looking at, it's not just standalone addiction. There are also issue of lacking housing, food, and safety in his living. These are actually barriers to help them get in touch with recovery. There are also criminal issue, crime, justice involvement. They have past or current still involved with the criminal case that need to be addressed. Okay. And also what we are looking at is there are disparity for them to assess the care they need, like treatment even. And what this exposure is really, to this systematic, injustice of helping them to assess treatment is actually driving the addiction up, you see. Then these clients is also happen to be a veteran. Okay, he's been to war and now he's retired from active action in the army. And what we are looking at is also he has PTSD, he's homeless, and that he has also an opiate issue. He's actually into fentanyl addiction. So these are things that we are looking at. So it's not as simple as addiction treatment. And he's also quite old. So what happened here is his age, so these are things with age, you usually have medical health issue that need to be addressed at the same time. So it's increasing complex. Client number 3. Okay, this client is kind of a chronic relapser. Okay, that's what we call it. He has problem engaging with treatment. And when he come to us, he was actually struggling, to even fund his treatment. He need to get help. He doesn't have insurance. He come all the way from Canada. And what happened here is they have a long list of waiting for treatment, and he can't have, he need to assess treatment due to also suicidal concern, and he was sent over to us for treatment. So what I noticed for clients like this, they actually struggle to assess treatment as much as they need to and at the time they need to, because there are long waiting lists. And not only that, he's a chronic relapser. So getting treatment has become a big challenge for him. So one of the things we do is also identify the trigger, why he keep relapsing, what trigger him to keep using. We have to develop a very strong relapse prevention plan for him, as well as a strong aftercare, because those are critical factors. And also his motivation for change, being a chronic relapser, these people who constantly relapse, their motivation are quite low. In fact, I would say most of the time they are preparing for the next relapse. So this is someone that they actually require long-term ongoing support even after primary treatment. And that is one of the things we look into after primary treatment, is to get him into another facility for secondary care back in Canada where he comes from. Yeah, so that is client. So those are the 3 client profile that we are exploring. Okay, so let's go to trend number 4. Okay, so we are still at the observation of the addiction trend today. Okay, technology actually play a part in addiction. Why? Okay, it does have impact, but it also can be a helpful element. Okay, I'm not saying that technology is all that bad. Okay, why? Especially during COVID, I can see technology has been planted, has been utilized. We have online telehealth across all platforms that we can utilize it. Like even here, I can interact with you, exploring this with you all the way from Thailand. That is the beauty of technology. Okay, it has its benefit, but it's how we are going to use it to help people to assess that. Okay, so increased access is one of the way we can use it. Okay, digital intervention. We can see a lot of apps that can be used for self-monitoring, relapse prevention, which we are not going to exploit here, but there are. Okay, however, with technology, it also comes with a risk. Especially with people who are struggling with sex addictions or pornography, there are a lot of porn sites, the dating app site, this actually fuel those addictions. So what I would say is actually we can utilize technology in a very healthy way to get people into treatment or in some form of treatment, and that can be a sustainable factor for them in their ongoing recovery journey. So I would say it has to be a hybrid person, not just 100% online, because that will also promote isolation and, from society, which we do not want to. All right. Okay, the next slide. So moving forward in the current observation of what addiction is happening, I would say we need to have a responsive and compassionate care. As we know, addiction trend is increasing complex, becoming more complex. People are using multiple drugs. Okay, and there's a synthetic drugs danger. We should be able to adapt to that in order to provide a more holistic care and treatment. Okay, and we're not just looking at addiction as standalone. We need to also cover the mental health, trauma, and socio-economic challenge of that clients. And not only that, it's not just about treatment in the short term. We also need to look at long-term recovery and using any type of tool. My approach is usually, even harm reduction, we do focus on that at times. Technology is something we can utilize a lot. We need to have a continuous combined effort to help in drugs prevention, harm reduction, as well as reducing the stigma. These can foster a compassionate approach, for people in recovery from addiction. We have covered the current observation. Now I'm going to talk about the impact of addiction. Okay, as we know, it doesn't just impact the individuals themselves. Okay, they do impact people who are close to them, society, workplace, friends, and it has a wider reach and a negative reach on people who are using and those who are around them. Okay, so this is quite a repeat of what we have. I'm not going to go into it, but I would like you all to focus on number 3. Okay, addiction involves a change in the brain circuit relating to reward, motivation, memory, and related control. What it means is the way we look at rewards and feeling pleasure has changed. It's not just normal reward, normal pleasure. We're looking for extreme intensive, pleasure, as what Dr. Gabriel has explained earlier. How is this formed? It's through long periods of abuse of SUD, substance, or even behavioral addiction. So the impact of addiction, first we talk about the physical health. I call it the body under siege. Okay, we can look at organ damage. Okay, alcoholism, it damages the liver. Smoking, inhaling what you call vape, lungs, okay, damages. Stimulant, it impact the heart. Okay, most of these will also impact the kidney. Weakened immune system due to long period of addiction. Okay, interestingly, people might ask, Tony, with behavioral addiction like porn, gambling, does it impact the immune or the physical health? In my experience and working with behavioral addiction, the immune system are also impacted. It's interesting to know it, but it does. Okay, and most of these people with addiction issue, they have very poor diet, which leads to nutritional deficiency. Okay, that is something you should also take note. And what it impacts is also there's an overdose risk for those who are on taking drugs or alcohol. Mostly it's drugs in this case, okay? And if they are involved in sex addiction, there could be increased risk with other disease like HIV. If you are needle sharing for drugs, you could also in risk of getting hepatitis through needle sharing. So that is one thing about physical health, okay? The next thing, with impact on mental health, as I have mentioned before, drugs have become more complex and we don't just treat addiction as standalone because it has an impact on their mental health. We are talking about co-occurring disorder like depression, anxiety, PTSD, OCD, bipolar. That is also due to long period of addiction. or drugs abuse. Okay. The other thing is self-medication. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, people with addiction, they tend to have mental health issue like depressed, or they are, cannot focus. What they tend to do, they go online, they start reading, start researching. Yeah, today we have what? ChatGPT. They will give you ideas, information, and what they do, they go to pharmacy, start buying things, okay, medication, and medicate themselves. I have seen an increasing trend with clients putting themselves on ADHD medication because they can't focus due to large amount and long period of abuse on perhaps stimulant drugs. And what they do, they go to pharmacy and buy ADHD medication like Ritalin so that they can stay focused. So self-medication has become a trend as well. Okay, substance-induced disorder, these are due to long period of using drugs, and that have causes psychosis. The mind has become disrupted, unstable, severe mood swing, hallucination, both visual, auditory. So that is what we see from long period of drug use, and that has impacted their mental health. And most common thing we have seen from drug addiction is what? Cognitive impairment, like short-term memory loss. They can't make the right decision. Value has shifted, difficulty concentrating in their day-to-day tasks. All right, so those are mental health. So what we are looking here is actually, it does have an impact on both social and behavior. What does it mean? Social isolation, okay? Rarely do I see, okay, I use the word rarely, that people in deep of their addiction, they are able to function and socialize people. Most common thing that we've seen when they are deep into addiction is they withdraw from friends, families, or even their things they like to do. And why do they do that? Because all they care about, or their focus is getting the next high, and that actually, reduce their work to probably their rooms, their house, so that they can continue using. So isolation is a common thing that we are seeing. Relationship breakdown, like conflict in their relationship at home with family, distrust, divorce is quite a common thing, and stranded family member due to their addiction. We also seen people who have their career affected, occupational, academic decline. They can't focus on their study due to their addiction. As a result, job loss, poor performance, dropping out of job or school. Okay, some even get into legal issue. As Glenn has mentioned before, I'm in recovery myself. I'm 21 years, sober from all drugs and crime. But what happened here is we can see addiction, usually, especially in Singapore context, they are very strict with that, and usually it will lead to prison terms, incarceration, arrest, or even fine for addiction-related behavior. Okay, for us, we are working with international clients here, and most of them, they do have a legal issue pending while they're undergoing treatment with us, meaning that they got clean, sober up, they need to went home to their country and face the legal consequences. And quite common thing with impact of addiction, we see what? Financial ruin. Okay, most of them, I would say, 10 out of 10 have that issue, loss of asset like home, family, house, or inability to manage their finance. And that is a result of addiction. Okay, the next slide. So the family is also another way that it has been impacted. Okay, when we talk about the person using drugs, okay, yes, they are affected. We all agree. Okay, but not only that, people that they are closest to them have impacted. In the old days, we used to call this co-addiction. Okay, meaning they are involved in the addiction. They are together. They are tied to it. Okay, but what we are seeing is most of the family, they are very close to the people with individual with addiction. They are widely affected, like what? Emotional distress. They have the guilt, the stress, worry about them overdose, the loved one. They are also caught up in the financial hardship. Why? The family need to pay for their, to bail them out of their legal issue, bail money, penalty, okay, lawyer fee. They need to pay for their hospital treatment fee. Yeah, it can add up, or even have to give them money so that they do not go through their withdrawal. And that is a financial concern, a hardship on most of the family that have, their loved one stuck in addiction. The breaking down of trust. Okay, this is a common thing. People with addiction, they have a lot of lies, broken promises, and they are constant worry about their loved one. worry for them. Okay, so they will continue to lie. This is a common thing. Okay, if we have also seen adult with children, they are in addiction. So who is at risk here? The children. Okay, there are high rate of abuse, neglect, even that they could be in addiction, they could not take care of their mental health, and this could impact the child. And this child, most of them will grow up, unfortunately, to be stuck in that addiction cycle. Okay, codependency, we're talking about family members who enable their loved one to continue in their addiction because they do not know what to do. And that is quite a common thing, or they are overly involved, okay, in their helping their loved one to stop addiction. One of the common thing I can see in my early days of my addiction, my mom was trying to get me sober up, clean, but that doesn't help. That controlling actually drives me wanting to do more drugs to spite her. So a lot of times, family members, especially parents, are caught in that cycle of not knowing what to do. They become very dependent on the reaction and the response of their loved one who are addicted. Okay, so family is also impacted. All right, the next slide. What we are looking on the broader sense after family is society and community. What happened here is does strain the healthcare system, okay, because these people need help. I think with common thing in IMH today, they have limited bed. They do have a waiting list for people who wanting to get help. So when the addictions population are increasing, that put a lot of strain in the hospital IMH system to support them. Criminal justice system, I think our prison department has managed it pretty well. But again, with increasing addiction population, that does affect the criminal system as well, the justice system burden to function in a capable way, especially with all the help that are reaching out for all these people. Lost productivities, workplace where these addicts are working, productivities could be affected. It could also affect the company to have a lower economic output of a result, as what we say. Public safety, especially in US with fentanyl addiction, you can see the public, the community where these addicts are hanging out is causing a lot of impact, and people don't feel safe, like increasing crime rate. People are getting using on the street and things like that. It does create a safety concern. Homelessness, poverty, I think addiction does contribute to that, and it drives up that issue as well. I'm not too sure about Singapore, but in my clients, where they come from, this is quite a big thing, common thing, and that has been also a challenge for them in their recovery. Where do they go back to after treatment? So that's why in planning their treatment, we have to consider that as well. So with the addiction impact, society, community does have a big impact, okay? Okay, the brain, okay, the science behind, okay, so we are wrapping up on the impact. We know now that the addiction changes the brain reward system, especially the dopamine pathway, the way we respond, okay, to pleasure, and we seeking out all these things. It impacts our decision making, our impulse control, as well as our judgment, okay, and these are the result of powerful craving, or what we call as a diminished ability to resist using. Okay, even though they could know there are negative consequences, like in Singapore, we know you use drug, you are caught, you go to prison or you go to DRC. Okay, but that doesn't stop people from using. Why? Because they have lost that ability to make the right decision, to stop themselves from doing it. They are stuck in that cycle. Okay, so that's why we call addiction as a disease. It's not a weakness of their character. When you know it's a disease, they have to get treatment. Then they can manage their symptoms, this disease. Okay, and it's not as simple as just stop using, because they cannot stop at that stage. Yeah, so that is where we need to look at it. Okay, what are the treatment that we can provide for them? Really, we're looking at integrated treatment. We need to address the physical, mental, and social needs at the same time. There are different types of therapy that we can use. Okay. And then we have MAD, medication-assisted treatment. Okay, this can help with withdrawal and cutting down, tapering down. Support system is very important. Okay, I'm putting here a peer support group, community support, sober living environment. Okay, the next slide. Okay, so now we are entering into treatment method. What are the treatment methods that are available? Okay, so we say addiction is not a moral feeling, but it's actually a treatable condition. Okay, why? Because we recognize it as a disease. but this disease can be arrested, managed, okay? But what we really need to do is we need to provide accessible and evidence-based treatment, okay, with prevention effort. I'm a big advocate for policy that help address addiction as a public health issue, okay? Even though we are a rehab that focus on what we are doing treatment, but I do think that a policy that actually help address addiction, it has a big advantage for these people accessing help, okay? We need to have a compassion and support for those with addiction, okay? Doesn't mean we endorse it, but doesn't mean we need to punish them, okay? I think being in addiction and wanting to change, it's a big struggle already. We can provide the right help and be there with them, okay? I'm a product of the treatment that I've been given and the help that I have. And today, you know, I'm coming back and contributing in this work, okay? So what you really need to do is educate yourself, looking for causes if you're really interested in working with people, or if you have a loved one, please know there are help available. So what are the current treatments? So the first step, okay, if you are into drugs or substance use, you probably need a detox, okay? Okay, so this is where you can get it at hospital, IMH, in Singapore context. We do provide treatment that have detox as well, okay? What is the reason for what we call as MAT, medication-assisted therapy, is to safely remove the substance from the body, okay? We no longer do cold turkey like the old days, okay? Today, we are more educated. We know what is the right and the safe way to do that. So the first step is detox, okay? The next slide. Okay, then we need to work with the mind. Okay, so now physically, they are gone through the detox, they are stable. We need to change their way of thinking, negative thinking. Okay, so this therapy, like CBT, DBT, MI, motivational interviewing, as well as family therapy is very crucial. Okay, and that will help them to have a better integration into their society back home, because family is a very strong component. Okay. So these are the 4 areas that we focus on. Okay, next slide. Supporting recovery. Unfortunately, I would like to say some people in recovery, they cannot go without medication due to mental health disorder. Like some people would have got, let's say, OCD or some sort of bipolar or other mental health diagnosis. They need to be on medication. However, doesn't mean they are not in recovery. Okay, they just need on medication to help contain their mental health issue, while they can still work on their addiction with counseling and other therapy. The reason is why we can help them to maintain stability, you know, lessen the withdrawal, the impact of their craving, you know, and re-establish normal brain function. Okay, so we have a different type. I don't think in Singapore we have methadone anymore. But Suboxone, but we do have naltrexone, if I'm not wrong. So there are many other types. So we over here in my center, we do use that, yeah, for to help them with their recovery. Okay. Remember, medical assist therapy is not what we call as cross addiction, substituting. Okay. It only happens if you abuse it and use it for the wrong purpose. That is cross addiction substituting. Sometimes it does help. Okay. There are different types of treatment. Okay. People tend to ask me, what can I do if I don't want to come for inpatient? So this is a sequence that I would like to introduce. First, if they are actually in their deep of their addiction, I would recommend an inpatient or residential treatment. Why? These provide 24/7 intensive and structured care. Okay. If they do have withdrawal symptoms and they are drugs, they may need partial hospitalization program. Okay, this is another form. They could go to the daytime for day intensive day treatment, and at night they return home. Okay, so that is another. If they are not able to attend residential treatment, we have also intensive outpatient treatment program. So this is for people who still have to go to work or school and they cannot be disrupted. But they would like to engage with treatment, so they can actually, go to this IOP, intensive outpatient treatment. There are clinics that provided that. Of course, it's not cheap. So what they do is after work, they can attend the program and then go home. And then there are standard outpatient treatment. These are less intensive, less frequent. They need to have a lot of commitment and discipline to get through this. There are also other continuums of care, like counseling. We have also, in Singapore context, we all have halfway house, I believe, that they can stay and be supported. Over here, we have sober living program for people who are not ready to return home, but they have completed primary treatment. Okay. All right, the next one. I strongly recommend peer support group. If you know Alcoholic Anonymous, Narcotic Anonymous, these are very good resources in the community. Or there are other resource, a support group that you can look out for. Why? It actually provides a sense of belonging, reduce isolation, as well as accountability. Okay, and it's free. It's widely available. Other options: Smart Recovery, Life Ring, Circular Recovery, Women for Sobriety. Family member, we have Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, that is for narcotics family. All right. So these provide ongoing support for the client. So as I said, as drugs are addiction are getting more complex, or substance use addiction are getting more complex, we actually advocate introducing other aspects of treatment, like mindfulness, meditation practice, yoga, fitness program, art, music therapy. We also help clients to address nutrition, because a lot of people in addiction, they have very poor nutrition level. Okay. And also another aspect of treatment, I would say, method is helping them to redefine their purpose. Okay. And very often that has been very extremely helpful. We guide a person to understand what their purpose is, what are they looking for, and that can help deter a relapse back into their addiction again. Okay. All right. So we are coming to the end. Okay. At the moment, June 2025, the current emerging trend in treatment is telehealth, or what we call as virtual care. There are, apps, platforms that provide counseling for people who really, can't access it on the physical aspect level. Okay, there are personalized medicine that can help them to get a better nutrition and improving their physical health. There are apps, okay, that can access to help them track their recovery progress, even like online CBT exercise, or even real-time support. Yeah. Trauma-informed care. As I said, due to the complexity of addiction today, people are beginning to have higher need for treatment and dealing with their addiction. I would say it's good to consider, having a trauma-informed care if there are element of childhood trauma involved. Okay. The last one is quite controversial, but what we also looking at is psychedelic assisted treatment. I believe in Singapore they do provide, but it's at hospital and monitored under psychiatrists. It's for people with trauma and addiction. It's still in clinical trial, I believe. I'm not too well informed on this, but over here in Thailand, they are able to assess like ketamine treatment. That can help with reduced craving. And what it does is actually not putting them on long-term ketamine use, but actually using the ketamine to assist them in their withdrawal. So this, you really have to, if you're interested, you can talk to psychiatrists to see if you are up for it. People like to ask me, Tony, can people recover from addiction? I think myself is a good product of that. I do believe people can change. Recovery is possible. Addiction is a treatable disease, but it's also a lifelong journey of healing and growth. It's not just like you do it for now, you are okay. You have to constantly engage with that. Okay. Remember, as I said, addiction is a disease. If you don't take care of it, the disease will return. Means the relapse is inevitable. All right. There are many effective treatment methods today to meet a diversified needs. Okay. But remember, seeking help is not a weakness. It's actually a strength. You will get well. Okay. Support, understanding, and continual engagement in recovery are key to long-term success. I can testify to that. Even today, I'm still engaging with support groups to help me. Even though I could be involved in the work, work is my work. It doesn't help me in my recovery. It gives me my livelihood, but I still need to engage with, some form of support. Yeah. If you know someone who need help, if you need help, reach out. Do not hesitate. Help is available. Thank you.
All right, Tony. Oh man, both of our speakers have provided so much information, and I'm sure many of us are already benefiting from it.